Hey everyone, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday morning DFS version. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always by Andrew Laird. We are sponsored by WynnBET. We appreciate their sponsorship. They're the exclusive sponsor of the RotoWire Fantasy Podcast. Andrew, we've made it past week one. We have a base of stats and games and highlights to watch. How is everything with you? I'm looking forward to week two.
Everything's good. I'll say that I've seen a bunch of tweets this week about people who have either been proven right or proven wrong on their preseason expectations based off of 1 week. And I feel like we constantly talk about how there are small sample sizes in DFS. And in order to know how good you are, you have to probably play like thousands of slates. And that's just like not happening in football, in the NFL. Like we just don't have them. And so it's funny for people to have like some sort of confirmation bias after a single week of the NFL where it's just such a small sample. And yet we're going to say like, hey, this guy played really well this week, so he's going to play well this week. And we're just going to go with that. And I don't know if, some people will be proven right, but I felt like based off of last week, I was looking at, certain things that I obviously built my lineups on things that I thought would happen. Right. And obviously they did not happen, or else I would be a lot happier of how my results went. But I just feel like we have to remember that what happened last week doesn't have that big of an indication on what happens this week. And so, we may have learned a few things, but really what we should be learning more about DFS week to week is just whether, we put the right lineups in the right contests, whether we enter the right contests, and like the actual results on the field probably matter so insignificantly that and it's tough because we're about to do a podcast about what we think is going to happen on the field, but like that's probably like the last thing that we should be focusing on for DFS.
I wouldn't mind some good results on the field too, though.
I spent 3 hours of my life watching the Jets.
Oh God!
Which was like really, that was my face for the first half, and then there was some promise, and that's how my DFS results went, where I was like, and by the end it was like, okay, there's some promise here, and hopefully week two will be better.
It's funny because my watching the Niners was the complete opposite approach. The first three quarters, I'm like, holy crap, they are really. I was talking about them.
We're going to the Super Bowl.
Going to the Super Bowl. I'm like, I really like this team. And by the end of the fourth quarter, I was like, the entire team is dead and they can't stop anybody. And they gave up 60 points in the fourth quarter to Jared Goff and something named Quinton Cephas. And it's just. I was just like, this is so bad. And then more guys got hurt during the week. And it's just, I don't know, man, this team is so injury cursed, but I think it's half injury cursed and half a huge reliance on guys who can't stay healthy. Like at some point you figure out that Raheem Mostert probably can't play 17 NFL games. And it's just a matter of when. The problem is I didn't really think when was going to be after 2 carries.
Right away. Yeah. I was looking at a bunch of cash builds. I played Mostert in cash, which ended up basically tanking me. And
but like he was, if he played the whole game, he would have been huge. Like there's no, it's really hard to fault that because if Eli Mitchell is going to get that many yards and Mostert was 2 for 20 before he got hurt, the running lanes were everything we thought was going to happen happened. It just happened to be with a different guy.
Yeah. So I was going back and just looking at some of the lineups that I made, and I ended up playing very minimal cash this week. Like I kind of made the point of like, I'm going to play some more tournaments, which obviously the foundation of playing consistent tournaments is just getting more and more comfortable with losing. And I ended up not losing as much as I thought I was going to, but the lineup that I was like particularly excited about going into the game was my Packers stack. And I like went by, and obviously I'm like competing for dead last with that lineup with the way they played. And I think it's just important to be like, was the lineup build right? Yep. Or at least was it a reasonable lineup build? Did I, focus on guys who were too popular or not popular enough? Like, was that lineup okay? And I think for people who were both, positive or negative last week, like the most important thing is to go back and not look at where you finished, but like look at your lineups and say like, did this lineup make sense? And the Packers getting smoked by the Saints, obviously it's like, if I knew that was going to happen, I wouldn't have built that lineup. But like we don't know any of this beforehand. And so like, did the Packers stack make sense? And it was like, yes. But on the flip side, I was like, why didn't I have a Saints lineup? Like I knew that people were going to play the Packers.
Right.
We talked about how like Jameis Winston is like a great quarterback for DFS because he just likes to sling it. He didn't even end up throwing that many passes.
Yeah, he didn't. I mean, I think that he was a huge. The 5 touchdowns was a huge outlier. I mean, he threw it was an all-time NFL record for the most TDs with the fewest amount of yards. So
right, like if you could have a bailout 5 touchdowns,
right,
that's what it was. But I think so. On the other side, what I have to control myself is when you start playing multiple lineups in tournaments, and I for years have not done this, and so this is new to me. But there's this thought of initially like, let me get as much exposure as I can to all of these games, and it's like you can't do that. You need to take stands and build around them. But there is just like that real pull of like, well, let me just like that. Like I didn't want any part of the Saints,
right?
Because I had a Packers stack. What was the one that I actually won on? I can't even remember because it wasn't all that great. But like the worst part was looking to see the Chiefs stacks winning, and you're just like, duh.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, of course I should have played Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey. But...
right. And we were talking how there was like plenty of value last week, particularly in wide receivers, and it was like you could have gotten away with it. And we were just like, oh, it's just too expensive to get Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill, and there they are at the top of GPPs.
Yeah, I only played 2 lineups on FanDuel, but one was a Mahomes Hill one, and it did cash, and it was good, and it was solid, and it made up for the other one. But yeah, I mean, no Chiefs on this slate. Let's get to the slate. No Chiefs on the slate in week 2. They are the Sunday night game against Baltimore. Pretty good game there. Detroit and Green Bay is on the Monday night game, which is I don't think exactly what they were looking for when they built that built that lineup, but. The Giants and the Washington football team played last night. So we won't be covering those games. This is a very interesting slate in terms of like the way it's split. We have 9 games at 10 in the morning Pacific time, my time, 4 games late. All 4 late games are over-unders of 51 or more. All 9 early games are 49.5 or less, and 8 of the 9 are 48 under. So if you're winning your GPP at the in-between games, I wouldn't go buy the Porsche quite yet because there might be some points coming in the second half. And if you're losing, it's good because you may have a bunch of live. I've never seen we usually get 9-4s like a normal split, but I've never seen a split where all the high-scoring games we're going to target are in the afternoon and none are in the morning. It's a very weird breakdown. So
I remember early on last week, there were like the early games were just awful, and everyone's like, man, congrats to everybody who stacked the late games. And like this is an actual case where that's probably going to be the case.
So let's talk about those high total games. We have 4 afternoon games. Minnesota and Arizona is a 51. It's an interesting game. You and I really liked we talked to you last week. We liked the Arizona-Tennessee stacking game, and that worked really great for the Arizona side, but Tennessee looked horrible, and Arizona's D actually looked pretty good. Chandler Jones was a monster.
He's a beast.
5 sacks. Atlanta at Tampa Bay. Atlanta, who looked terrible last week, at Tampa Bay's 52. Tennessee at Seattle's 54. And then the game that I think everybody is going to try and get as many pieces of as possible, Dallas and the Chargers is 55. Chargers first regular season game in SoFi Stadium. That just feels like one of those games where I look at it, I'm like, I don't even know how this is possible to go under. which means it'll be 17-13. But
it's definitely going under. Yeah,
that certainly raises a game that there could be a lot of players, a lot of points, a lot of fun stuff back and forth.
Yeah, no, I think that's the game that everybody's going to try to get as much exposure to, and we just have to figure out whether there are too many people doing that and that we shouldn't. But I don't know. I feel like last week with the Chiefs, it was like that game. Did that game have the highest total? It didn't. It was one of them. It might have been the Tennessee.
I think Kansas City actually did.
Was it Kansas City?
Yeah.
So we were like, we actually didn't expect that game to be that popular because those guys are so expensive, and not that this Chargers game is not, but I think people are still going to really want to go to that game, and so that kind of makes me think maybe I shouldn't.
I think there's enough that left different ways to go that you can still go with it, and maybe get different elsewhere. But week two, we talk about week 2 is dangerous because we have 1 week of games, and after week 2, we're going to realize that a lot of that week stuff didn't matter, which is important to think of. Like we know that some teams that look terrible, like we look at like Jacksonville last year in week 1 beat Indianapolis, and we're like, oh, maybe Jacksonville's good. I don't think they won another game. So it's just maybe they won one other, whatever. They're 2 or whatever. They won 1 late. But in low
one
total,
less than the Jets. That's all I know.
Yeah, exactly. In low totals, we have kind of a bunch of games that are around that 45 line. Cincy and Chicago's 45. Denver at Jacksonville's 45. New Orleans at Carolina, a game you don't really think to be that low, is 44.5. But obviously those teams are at least New Orleans is different, although they scored 31 points last week.
Yeah.
And then, as always, we have the Jets game with the lowest total on the board. New England at the Jets, 43. Yeah, I don't know. Even because a Jets fan, you're like, well, they're not good, but like all their games are low scoring too. Like it's a bad combo for you.
It's just awful. Or if they're not low scoring, it's high scoring from one team,
right?
And it's usually not the green guys.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I still think you should talk to your son and maybe pick a different team to root for.
Do you think that's better than just giving up on football?
Yes, I think that's better than giving up football.
Okay. I mean, he likes Scott Hansen. That's what he likes. Well, Scott Hansen is his favorite football team.
So he might end up just rooting for his fantasy players for his whole life, which is
probably exactly what he does.
Probably what a lot of kids will end up doing, because I think that obviously is different than we were growing up. So that's funny though. But let's jump in. Let's talk about some guys who kind of like, optimal cash lineups. The guys that are going to be really popular this week. I think you look at quarterback. The guy that jumped out to me is like everybody's going to want to play him is Kyla Murray. Huge last week, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. And like we talked about Jameis kind of like falling into those 5 touchdowns, and it just worked out really well. But like Kyler looked every bit of that QB1 last week. He was the high scoring quarterback. He had 5 touchdowns, looked great. Joe Burrow had 260 yards and 2 touchdowns on Minnesota last week in a game. So they're playing Minnesota. How do you feel about Kyler? Do you think he's gonna be the most popular? Do you gravitate towards him right away? How do you feel about Kyler coming off the huge week 1?
So usually I don't pay up that much for quarterback. It's not that I play like cheap quarterbacks, but just like paying all the way up. It's like if it's not Mahomes, it feels a little weird. But if it's going to be anyone else, it's probably going to be Kyler. We've got Russell Wilson at 7,500 on DraftKings. Josh Allen's at 72, and then Brady 69. I mean, that's a pretty significant drop, at least from Murray. But I don't know. You just keep going back from like a median perspective. Like Murray is by far the best play, and it's just a matter of whether you want to pay down in other spots in order to get to him. And what I thought was weird was on this slate is at each position, but particularly running back, it felt like the difference in realistic output from the upper tier running backs to the like kind of next tier is closer than it usually is.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure. Like last week, there were just a ton of cash lineups that jammed all 3 of the 4 big ones, like whether it was Henry, Cook, McCaffrey, or Kamara. And I saw plenty of lineups with 3 of them because you could pay down at wide receiver. And there's still some cheap wide receivers this week, but I think there are some very, very good running backs that are more in the 6,000 to 7,500 range, as opposed to the upper tier, like McCaffrey at 99 or Cook at 91. Like I'm not sure you necessarily need those guys this week. And if you can save 1,000 or 2,000 from those guys, getting Kyler gets a little easier. And so I think we're going to see plenty of people at least want to play Kyler because, like I said, he's got like the highest floor of any quarterback on the slate by far.
Yeah, he does. I mean, and obviously he looked really good last week. But let's talk about those high-end running backs. We'll obviously get way into quarterbacks here when we're talking about GPPs. But the top guys that you think could be the most popular. We've got McCaffrey is 9,900. Kamara is 8,800. We have Derrick Henry. We have Dalvin Cook. Kind of those 4 guys. I think McCaffrey and Kamara are probably the 2 that are going to be the more popular in that range. I think that people are going to be worried about Derrick Henry with the game script against Seattle. Didn't play well last week, didn't do much. I think kind of the same with Cook. I think people are going to be worried that Minnesota's going to get behind. We're going to have a lot of Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen plays, but maybe not as much Dalvin Cook. I tend to think McCaffrey and Kamara are going to be the most popular of those 4. McCaffrey, didn't score a touchdown last week, still had 28 points or 27.5 points, something like that. 9 catches. He had over 95 yards rushing, or 98 yards rushing, 89 yards receiving. So he kind of was the same old C-Mac.
Yeah, I think the difficulty with that price is I think that there are guys who can match his floor for cheaper, particularly this week. Like Carolina's the 6th biggest underdog on the slate. The 6th biggest or lowest implied total. So
New Orleans run D is very good.
Yeah. And so, we've seen him have, good games against everyone. So it's like tough to be like McCaffrey's a bad play, but I'm just not sure you need that much salary. Like I'm guessing the 2v2 of McCaffrey and whatever quarterback you go with versus Kyler Murray and some of the cheaper running backs.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that McCaffrey ends up being optimal, which sounds nuts because he's like Mr. Optimal.
And they did. I mean, they killed Aaron Jones last week, although that game script got out of control pretty quickly. Yeah. And that was, more probably as much of that as it was their run D. But their run D was really good in 2020. It looks like it's continuing over this week. So, yeah, I do get that there. Alvin Kamara is interesting. Kamara has had over 20 carries once in his career, and now he's had over 20 carries once in this season. So he's up to 2 times. Only the second time ever he had 20 carries. He was 20 for 83, scored a touchdown receiving. I think he had 3 catches for 8 yards. Got to think against Arizona, they're going to need him to be heavily involved. He's $1,100 less than C-Mac. Do you think a lot of people will go to Kamara in this matchup?
He's against Carolina, right? Not Arizona.
I knew that.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute.
I just talked about the Carolina run D against the New Orleans run D against McCaffrey. Yes, sorry, it's against Carolina. But I think that it's one of those games that Jameis, the 5 touchdowns is not going to happen. I mean, it's just that was a weird game. They only threw for 150 yards. I have to think they're going to lean on Kamara. I mean, 20 carries tells me a lot about maybe what their mindset is this year.
Well, I mean, particularly 20 carries in a game where like Winston threw 20 passes.
Yeah,
it's like it's not like
it's not like they ran 90 plays or something.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I think Kamara makes more sense than McCaffrey this week. I mean, obviously it's the same game, so we'll see both of them at the same time. But I just the only struggles I have with Kamara, is how much Jameis actually throws to him. Like we make this idea that like, there's no Michael Thomas, so there are all these targets available, but like we have basically no track record of a high receiving running back with Jameis under center. And so, you like the safety of Christian McCaffrey because like if they fall behind, they're gonna have to throw a lot, but he still catches a ton of passes. And the Saints, I just like if they fall behind, I just don't see Winston throwing, 5-yard outs to Kamara. Like I think he's just going to start gunning it, whether they tell him or not. And so that's like my only hesitation, but they're favored in this game. And so they should be running the ball more. And if they're going to run the ball, then it's Kamara. And so, you're just looking at, if you look at it just from that perspective, then he makes more sense.
Looking at like depends how you quantify Juwan Johnson as a tight end or a receiver, but he played tight end last week. I mean, they had like 4 catches by receivers last week.
Yeah, I mean,
Harris had 2, Callaway had 1, Chris Hogan had 1. I think that, and Ty Montgomery again, if you want running back or receiver, like 4 or 5. But it's crazy. I mean, he had 20 pass attempts and like 6 of them were wide receivers. So it was just a weird game. I think it's hard to. They had 38 points, by the way. They scored late. I had 31 on their score, but it's a weird game that I don't think we could take a lot from because I don't think they're going to get in many games exactly like that. So
yeah, I totally agree.
You mentioned. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but I'm not sure you need either McCaffrey or Kamara.
Okay.
Like I think that there are running backs that are cheaper who this week could be just as good, and you're getting $1,000 in savings.
Let's talk about those right now. Then, kind of in your optimal, like the most popular lineup, your cash lineup. I think before I get down in the 6,000s, I think the one that stuck out to me was Nick Chubb at 7,800 against Houston. He was 15 for 83 and 2 touchdowns last week. He was had 2 catches also. I mean, the big thing with him is he does share that role. Kareem Hunt plays a lot. I think Chubb played 53%. Hunt was 47% of the snaps, something like that. But you talk about a great game script. Cleveland's favored by 12.5, something in that range. And Chubb not only has that, like, get me a bunch of carries in the second half if the game script works out, but he's also an upside guy that can bust a play at any time also. So he combines those two. And I think that 7,800 is a weird range though. Like it's so close to the upper guys, and it's kind of far away from those 6,000 guys that we're going to like too. But I think in the matchup, I mean, Houston had a lot of trouble against running backs last year. They didn't last week, but that Jacksonville team was a total mess last week. I like Chubb at 7,800. I think a lot of people are going to also.
I would have bet my house that you were going to say Nick Chubb.
I was not. I'm nothing if not predictable.
So yeah, no, I think Chubb makes plenty of sense this week. What do you think about paying $6,300 for a running back that had 100% of the running back snaps and touches last week for the 6th highest implied total on the slate?
Is he 6,300? I saw he was 6,100. Oh, you're right, 6,300.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people are going to have Najee Harris. The 100% running, 100% of snaps was crazy. Like for a rookie, and you look at stats, and like there's very few running backs that ever had 100%. I played him last week. I played him over Joe Mixon last week, which worked out terribly. They were in the same range, and I liked both, and I had that one slot left. I knew I wanted to play one of them. I ended up picking the wrong one on my main lineup. I did play Mixon on my second lineup. That worked out, but the price seems low. It seems like for him playing that much, but he didn't do anything last week. He was 16 for 45. He was only on one catch. But they're playing Las Vegas, coming off the Monday night game, traveling east. They give up 2 touchdowns to the Ravens on Monday night and 4.7 yards per carry. Yeah, I think Najee is a really good play this week. I worry about that Pittsburgh offense a little bit. They looked horrible last week. I know they won the game, but like they had a blocked punt in there. I don't think Ben threw one pass over 20 yards. If he did, it was 1 or 2. Like their offense looked weird. Like both Juju and Deontay. I think he had maybe one long pass to Chase Claypool, but like Deontay and Juju's A dots were super low, and it's a weird offense right now. I don't know if they can block anybody, but 6,300 for a guy that's going to be, like you said, 6th highest implied total, playing all the snaps. It's hard to get away from Najee knowing how much they're going to feed him.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm not here to say that I think Najee Harris's floor is similar to McCaffrey's or Kamara's, but
it's a good floor though.
Yeah. And so just fundamentally the things that we should be looking at when we're building lineups are totals in terms of how many points a team is going to score and usage. And you're not, and then obviously salary after that. And there's just no better combination this week than Najee Harris, which is scary because again, he had a horrible, basically a lineup busting score last week, but that's kind of the things we have to look at. I don't think he was a bad play last week. That's more of a results over process. And I think playing him this week, the results should bring you there. The things that we fundamentally look at should point to Najee Harris. And that doesn't mean that, if Roethlisberger throws 60 times for a 7 ADOT, that's different. But hopefully Harris gets on a few of those pass attempts too.
Yeah. And the thing with usage is if they get inside the 5, he's going to be on the field, which is really important too. You're not worried about them, using somebody else. But it's weird. I think Pittsburgh's one of those teams. I think in 6 weeks we're going to know a lot about their offense that we don't know now. They can be fine. They can be good. I think we think they'll be good, but not great. But I think that they can be bad too. I don't know. It's one of those few teams that I have no clue. There's a lot of teams I have no clue about, but they're one of the ones that I don't have any clue what their offense is going to look like. If Ben is done, or if Ben just looked bad last week, and he's going to be Ben again. So they're a tough team, but I think a lot of people are going to gravitate toward Najee. I think that 100% of snaps has been everywhere on Twitter this week. Every article has mentioned that. So I think he was the next guy I had in here as kind of the cash optimal guy. One guy I wanted to ask you about in running backs in this range before we move to receivers for kind of the popular ones. What do you think people do with Eli Mitchell? We kind of referenced Raheem Mostert earlier. Mitchell's 5,000. I don't really think there's any quote unquote free squares this week, but Mitchell's 5,000 on a team that loves to run the ball, on a team that scored 41 points last week. He's clearly the speed guy that kind of just falls right into that Mostert role. They're going to get him on those outside zone reads. He makes the one cut and he's gone kind of thing. Looked good last week, although I think his touchdown, a lot of running backs would have scored on that. It was blocked really well. George Kittle actually pancaked 2 guys on that run. It was freaking awesome. For as much as people George Kittle didn't do that much. George Kittle does a lot. It's just you don't see it.
Yeah,
but
you're just not counting pancakes enough.
Yeah, exactly. So, do you think Eli Mitchell is good enough to play in a lineup? He's 5,000. B, do you trust Kyle Shanahan at all to give him the ball enough? I think the answer to the second one is nobody knows the answer to that one, but who knows who ends up in the doghouse in the next 48 hours. But what do you do with Eli Mitchell at 5,000, kind of with everybody's been talking about him this week?
I think that the difficulty with playing him is that there's pretty big opportunity costs when it comes to running back this week. And so if you're going to play 3, then obviously he's got to be in the discussion. But like I said, we have cheaper guys that I think have a path to being better. And when
you say cheap, you mean cheap, not cheaper than Eli, right?
Correct, not cheaper than him.
Gotcha.
But I think we kind of have values in a lot of spots that if you don't necessarily want to play McCaffrey or Kamara or Cook, you don't have to.
Yeah.
And so now it's if I want to play Najee Harris, or I'm almost contractually obligated to mention Chris Carson is cheaper than Najee Harris, and
I definitely have him as someone to mention when we talk about the running backs for GPPs. I like Carson too.
The Seahawks have the 3rd highest total of the slate, and so he's actually cheaper.
and they're favored too. So if you look at a good formula for running back, it's certainly Chris Carson this week.
And the same thing applies, and I can't believe I'm saying this, to David Montgomery. Yeah. I mean, they're playing the Bengals, and
but he looked good against the Rams last week. That.
Yeah.
At some point, I think we've not made fun of the David Montgomery thing anymore because he's been so good. But He looks really good Monday night.
Yeah,
On an offense that had zero threat of throwing the ball more than 5 yards down the field.
Right, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just feel like we have a bunch of guys, and even like a little more expensive, like Austin Eckler, I think is always a good play. Like, so when you start, you mentioned Chubb. I'm trying to think. There was another one that. I don't think Zeke is like the worst play in the world. I probably wouldn't play him in cash, but like he's 6,200. Like,
and no one wants to take Zeke right now.
Right.
But I mean, Joe Mixon had 33 touches and he's 7,000. There are a ton of guys in this range.
Yes, and so I think opportunity cost is really the reason why I don't need to put my faith into Shanahan's backfield roulette.
I don't blame anyone for not putting trust in Kyle Shanahan and his lineup decisions at the moment. So let's talk about receivers. But first, a note from our sponsor, WynnBET. There's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire. It's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up. I have an incredible offer for you from RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more all at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette. Double down in blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at Baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, Virginia, all while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcasts. Also a note from our Blue Wire sponsors also. So, Andrew, wide receiver in terms of the popular, cash game optimal guys. I kind of went in the 6,000 range. I think there's 3 guys in here that people are going to really play a lot of. Both Cowboys guys, between CeeDee Lamb at 6,400 and Amari Cooper at 6,800. We talked about that. That Cowboys-Chargers game is going to be really popular. I think everybody loved the Dallas offense on Thursday night against the Buccaneers. And then Cooper Kupp at 6,000. One of those, like, we run into the situation where Monday night games don't get factored in the pricing, and Cooper Kupp looked awesome on Monday night. They talked about how Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford have breakfast every morning 4,000 times on the broadcast on Monday night. You had probably gone to bed on the East Coast, but it got to the point where, like, we get it. Like, they have breakfast together. And why is Robert Woods not joining breakfast? Like, how dumb is
it? Yeah, really.
But he's only 6,000. He would not be 6,000 if the Monday night had been, obviously they put the pricing out before Monday night game, so it doesn't get factored in. Those are the 3 that jumped out to me. Like, everybody's going to play these guys. And then DeAndre Hopkins at the expensive one at 8,000. If people are going to stack him and Kyler together, try and stack that game. Those are the ones that jumped out to me. Like, I think everybody's going to gravitate towards those guys. Where do you fall on who are going to be the super popular wide receivers this week?
I think that's absolutely the group that most people focus on. I think Kupp might be on like 150% of cash teams. Like,
right,
I think
exactly.
Not only that, just the type of receiver isn't seeing what Tyler Lockett did last week. I think people are just like, nope, that's exactly what Cooper Kupp can do. And so they're going to plug him in. Yeah. Obviously, he doesn't have the breakfast narrative, but that makes Robert Woods a little more attractive for tournaments because everybody's going to play Kupp.
I think he's like an almost automatic. Like, if you're going to play someone that game, I think in a tournament, I think you just flip to Woods because Woods is really good, and just like everybody's talking about Kupp.
Yeah, and just maybe he doesn't eat breakfast, and maybe he has lunch with Stafford, and they just didn't talk about it. Like, I don't know. It's always something. But anyway, no, I think that's definitely the group. I think there are some cheaper guys that could be popular, including one of your favorite players of all time, because you have some injuries.
DJ Moore?
Wrong initials.
KJ Hamler.
There it is.
My dude. Dropped a 50-yard touchdown last week. It was great.
But we're close.
It wasn't a great pass, but one that an NFL receiver has to catch. But I think that with Jerry Jeudy obviously being injured and out for 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it is, I think that Hamler's finally on everyone's radar, not just mine.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. And I think you can make the same kind of argument for Cedric Wilson from the Cowboys. Which is weird to me.
I was saving that one for later, but I love that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
So I'm not sure why. Not that I'm not sure why, but do you think Michael Gallup would have been a reasonable target this week if he was healthy?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it depends. His price would have been probably 5,100 or something like that. So it probably would have fallen that weird mid-range. But yeah, I think Mike Gallup's really good. It's just that the fact that Cedric Wilson's 3,100. Like, if you want a piece of this game, like Gallup at 5,100, you would have been like, well, like, he's clearly the third guy. Like, I just can go up to CeeDee Lamb and find a way to do it. But it's just the fact that Wilson is 3,000 less than these other guys too.
So do you think Gallup was 4,900?
Okay.
So your 51 is a pretty good guess. But do you think that people who play Wilson are playing him with Lamb and or Cooper?
I think you get two different builds. I think you get a Dak, one of the receivers, and then Cedric Wilson is the second receiver in a stack. Or I think you get Cedric Wilson totally by himself as a cheap guy to get a piece of that game if you're not stacking that game. Yeah, it's kind of how I would see people doing it. So it could be either or. I don't think you're going to get a lot of people that play Wilson and one of the receivers without Dak. I think that'd be an interesting. I mean, yes, you could do it, but I think if you're going to get two receivers, you want the quarterback too. I just think a lot of people will go Wilson just because he's so cheap and it gets you so much other stuff in it. You get a piece of the highest total game with the guy that had a bunch of targets last week. They're talking. I guess he didn't have much. He had like 3 targets, but they're talking him up this week like he slides into that Gallup role easily. I just think price plus game is going to be a lot of Cedric Wilson.
And do you think that more people focus on the Cowboys?
I'm focusing more on the Chargers, but I think that a lot of people focus on the Cowboys because they have so many weapons. And I just think he's so cheap. I mean, he's almost min price for receiver.
Yeah.
That if you can get a receiver in that game, if there was a Chargers receiver that was 3,100 that that people liked, I think it'd be the same kind of thing. But
okay,
I just don't.
So it's just like a Charger stack with a Wilson run back or a Cowboy stack with Wilson.
I think that's going to be popular. But I also think there's going to be a lot of lineups that don't necessarily stack that game and just throw Wilson in as the guy to save money because you get a piece of that game. But let's talk about popular tight ends real quick before we jump into those tournament builds. I mean, I guess you can't really start tight end without talking about Darren Waller and his freaking 19 targets on Monday night. It was almost a joke. Like I was talking to a friend during a game. It's like, it's just kind of dumb. Like he just drops back and just throws it to Waller every damn time. Like it was just, you would talk about quarterbacks honing in on a receiver and it was like over and over and over. And like Waller was 10 for 105 and a touchdown and dropped like a 40-yard bomb down the sideline that was a little behind him, but a ball that he has to catch. And like Carr missed him a couple times. Like his game could have been massive. It was already big enough, but they're at Pittsburgh they're at Pittsburgh. Yeah. They're at Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin's a good, smart coach. Like you got to figure he's going to do something to figure out that they throw to Waller every single time, right? Does it even matter? Like, is he just that good and that honed in on him that doesn't matter?
I just on this slate, I'm just not sure, at least in cash, that like 7,600 for a receiver. Like I don't even want to call him a tight end. Like just even a receiver, like playing as an underdog with west to east world, and they're not technically West Coast, but Western team to Pittsburgh.
You could throw them West Coast. I won't be offended by that.
Yeah, they touch a state that is touching the coast. I'll put that.
Same time zone.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't seem like it's the most worthwhile use of that much salary. Obviously, Waller's probably the best tight end available. Apologies to George Kittle and his pancakes, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like an ideal use of those funds when like I can get running backs or wide receivers that I'm a little more comfortable with, because ultimately you're also relying on Derek Carr.
Yeah, that's true.
Who I almost just called David.
I've called him David about 65% of the time, so it's a terrible percentage, but it's true. If there is a tight end in cash games you think everybody goes to if they don't go Waller just because Waller's expensive, is there one that there's like a bunch of the 4,000 I think are very playable, but is there one that you think is like everybody's going to gravitate towards in the like the cheaper 4,000 range kind of thing?
I don't think it's like overly popular. Like I think like Noah Fant is in a good position, and I'm starting to like turn into this guy who mentions Noah Fant on every podcast, which is weird.
Had a good game last week, I think.
But he had a good game last week against Jacksonville this week.
I think no Judy maybe helps him more than anybody else in that core too. I think people will go towards Tyler Higbee, another guy that would have been up a couple hundred if they had known about the Monday night success, but he was 5 of 68 on 6 targets. Seattle gave up a touchdown at 57 yards to tight end last week. As I look down here, I think he's probably the next popular at 4,100, but I think you're right. I think it's kind of a mix of percentages down there. I think after Waller, I think you can kind of play a lot of different guys. I don't think anybody will be uber popular, especially in a cash lineup.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about Higbee is, and this is going to just like accentuate my lack of like actual football knowledge. Like I never played football, and so I'm not like a hardcore football guy.
Right.
But so I'm going to use this very loosely. As
you sit here doing a hardcore in-depth football podcast.
No, this is a daily fantasy sports podcast that happens to be about football.
There you go.
So I was saying before how I had like some reservations about Alvin Kamara pass catching from Jameis Winston because we have very little evidence that Winston likes to throw to running backs. we have a decent history of Matthew Stafford throwing to tight ends. Like TJ Hawkinson was big last year.
Yep.
So that made me feel like better that Higbee could still be an option. Like, it's not like we're bringing in a quarterback that like only looks downfield or out wide. Like, he is this quarterback that like looks for his tight end. So like that quarterback change like didn't, keeps me okay with Higbee. And obviously week 1 completely justified what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stafford's just probably really good is when it comes down to it. I think we'll see, if he's a playoff type of quarterback, but he may certainly look good in week 1 and spread it around pretty well. I mean, we talked about Higbee had 6 targets, and Kupp was involved. Van Jefferson caught a touchdown. Robert Woods obviously caught a touchdown. Didn't have a ton of action, but did catch the touchdown. But so let's jump into those the GPP tournament kind of stuff. We talked about kind of some optimal high percentage guys, and obviously those guys are tournament playable also. But let's talk about quarterback receiver stacks. Kind of the way that I usually start out a tournament line is figure out what I want to do there. Do you have a favorite stack this week? Is there something you're definitely going to go towards? Where do you kind of fall on what you're going to do with your quarterback receiver stuff?
So we talked last week how like the Chiefs made sense, but they were expensive, and I can't really get a read on like how popular the top teams will be. Like so basically in terms of like implied points, like that's where I go for like passing game stacks, like who's going to score the most points, because a lot of points are scored through the air. So it's Tampa, Cleveland, Seattle, the Chargers, and the Cardinals. And obviously
Dallas must be right after that.
Dallas is a little lower.
Okay.
Because let me see here. Yeah, I have Dallas. Yeah, like a half point below that.
Okay.
So they're still high, but
gotcha. Okay.
So it's like you're not getting any real savings with Tampa. Like, you're going to have to, pay somewhat a lot for Brady. You still have to do whoever the wide receiver you get. Then you have to watch.
That's my thing with Tampa is like, good luck figuring out who's catching the passes.
Well, that, and you're going to end up having Gronk score the touchdowns anyway. So it's like, do I really want to play Gronk, who's like worthless without the touchdowns?
And do they throw the ball out in the second half too?
Right. So there's just like a problem there. Cleveland, like I'm not sure. Like the reason why they have such a high implied total is because they're playing Houston. Like
and that's a team that is very willing to run the ball when they're ahead too. Like I think that if they have a 14-point lead on Houston in the second half, like it's Chubb and Hunt, and it's just like they shut down Baker.
Right. So then we go to Seattle, where we have like a similar wide receiver issue with Metcalf and Lockett, and like who do you want to go to?
Yeah.
And obviously they're expensive, as is Russ. And it's not like the Cardinals give us that much savings, since we want Hopkins, but like after Hopkins, everyone else is cheap. But like, do you even want those guys?
Yeah. And Kyler and Hopkins are both the most expensive of their positions. So you're really, I mean, if you go with that stack, but you really better find some value pretty quick.
Right. And so like now all of a sudden I'm like, I don't like any of these. And I just like keep going down and down and down. But then like, obviously the further you go down, the fewer points they're expected to score. So like, but now it's like, now I'm like back to the Rams. So now I'm like, all right, Stafford, Woods, Higbee, and just like forget Kupp, because everybody's playing Kupp. And then you start getting into the quarterbacks you never want to play. Teddy Bridgewater, Jimmy Garoppolo, no offense. And now we're down to Dallas.
None taken.
Yeah. So like the only one that like made me think that maybe you can get away with not being overly popular is Buffalo. And
I have 2 highlighted, and that's actually one of them.
Yeah. And so maybe Buffalo's the answer.
So let's talk about Buffalo first then. Josh Allen kills Miami. Like he just owns Miami. That's like going back 3 years. Like he's been top 10 quarterback every week against Miami, except for last year in week 17, but he had 19 points at halftime and they took him out of the game. Like they just didn't they'd already clinched the playoffs. But Josh Allen struggles with pressure, which he had some troubles last week against Pittsburgh. He was a little more inaccurate, kind of the 2 years ago Josh Allen, not the last one. But Miami blitzes a lot. They may get pressure, but he beats if you don't get there with the blitz, Josh Allen's going to kill you. He had 51 passes in week 1, which I think is key. Like they are just going to throw the ball to the point that they made Zach Moss inactive last week because they're like, we're just going to run the ball. We're just going to throw the ball all the time. Like there's no point in the way we had this game set up. They're playing Pittsburgh. We're not going to run the ball against them. We're just going to throw the ball. Like they just admit they're going to throw the ball a ton. I guess the only thing is that you obviously want to pair him with Stephon Diggs, who was 9 for 69, 14 targets in week 1. But you have that cornerback stuff on their side. Xavier Howard's a really good cornerback for Miami. I don't know if they're going to play shadow coverage, but they're going to feed Diggs. Like, I think they're just going to go with it. I don't worry about that very much. Like, that'd be the one thing in there. But Stephon Diggs has double-digit PPR points in every single game he's played so far in his entire career with the Bills. Like, I know it's only been a year plus 1 game, but that's still crazy. There's never been like a 3 for 31 game in there the entire time. Like, it's wild. The interesting thing with that game is if you do stack that one, I do like it. It's one of my 2 stacks that I love, and I'll have a sneaky one also. Who do you come back with on Miami? Like, do you I think it's Jalen Waddle, who actually looked really good in week 1.
He looked really good.
You could go Will Fuller, but like, who knows what you're getting coming off the suspension? Who's how involved he is? Who knows how much he's practiced? Who knows how much? Like, there's a lot of things with Will Fuller that I like, but I'm a little worried. We just don't know what it looks like in this offense, and I don't love Tua throwing deep to my guy. Like, he had a couple of deep balls last week that looked all right, but I don't. It doesn't make me feel great. But I think Allen Diggs this week is really good, and I don't think it'll be that popular.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it there. The run back, maybe you just don't run it back.
It's probably, I mean, yeah, you can. There's no rule that you have to, but I don't know. I thought Jalen Waddle looked pretty good last week, but it's hard to figure out this. I mean, Gesicki had 0 catches. Like, it's just hard to figure out this Miami offense sometime. And what was Waddle? Waddle was 4 for 61 and a touchdown last week. Like, that would certainly play at the price. Yeah. He's 4,500. Like, at least the price works out with Waddle and someone that looked good in week 1.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think the way that you justify that not running it back, and it probably doesn't even make sense, but like the idea is that, I mean, they're not going to run Josh Allen if they're up, but like theoretically, if they're up big, then Allen probably had something to do with it because he has something to do with every touchdown they score. For sure. But yeah, I think it's going to be a thing all week season of like, so who do we want from Miami? And it's just like crickets. And so I don't know how much I want there.
So the other stack that I love, and you're going to get to it in your list at some point, but I love the Chargers this week. I know it's going to be popular, but it's funny. Justin Herbert only had 1 touchdown last week, but had 337 yards passing, and I actually thought he looked awesome. I watched a bunch of that game. I had actually bet on the Washington football team, so I had that game on one of my TVs. It didn't work out well for the bet, but I actually thought Herbert looked great. He had a couple plays in the end zone that just got dropped and just out of reach, but like really good throws. I like that he threw 47 times in a close game. I think that the game with Dallas is going to score. I don't know if we fully think they can hang with them, but Dallas is going to score points. I think it was pretty clear last week that Dallas's offense is pretty good. Brady lit up Dallas last week. DeMarcus Lawrence, their best pass rusher, is now not playing. Keenan Allen is the guy that I stack him with, but I think you get tricky. You can go with Mike Williams too, who's expensive enough that I don't think anybody's going to have him. He's 6,100. I think everybody, if they want to do it, will go up to Keenan Allen at 7,000 or find somebody else in that range. If Mike Williams was like 4,800 off the big usage, I think he'd be popular, but 6,100 is expensive enough that he had 12 targets last week. But I mean, Keenan Allen's averaging 12 targets a game his last 12 games, 12 targets a game his last 12 games with Herbert. Like he just focuses it on him. But I love Herbert Allen this week, and you can run it back with Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb, whatever you want to do. I don't know how I don't think it'll be unpopular. I think there's enough options in here. You talked about 4 stacks before you even got to the Chargers as your 5th highest implied total. It's my favorite stack of the week. I do like Allen Diggs, but Herbert Allen, one of the Cowboys running receivers, is kind of the way I'm going to start a bunch of lineups for sure.
So if you don't think that one's popular, I mean, I think the Cowboys will be popular as well. And so I think just naturally you'll end up getting some Chargers popularity because
and it's the highest total in the slate. Like, it's not going to be unpopular at all anyway. I think there's enough options though that I don't think like everybody gravitates towards it. I think what I'm saying is like, I think it's gonna be a lot of kind of medium to low popular. I think there's gonna be a lot of people playing. You can play Brady, you can play Dak, you can play Herbert, you can play Russ. I mean, there's just so many ways you can go, and all of them have good stacking options. I think it'll just kind of be spread out enough that you got to pick the one you like the best and go with it.
No, that's absolutely fair. I think that's the right way to think about it. I'll be honest. I was going to ask you about this because you're an expert on one side, but I saw a number of articles touting Jalen Hurts this week as like a one-off quarterback. I have him in the list of like quarterbacks you want to play naked. He's the one guy I have in there. Well, but like that's going to be the case all season. That like there's not going to be a wide receiver. That was exactly the combo I had last week. There you go. That reminded me of it. Devonta Smith looked darn good, and they were using him, and he's still really cheap this week. Yeah, Smith looked good. Rager ended up doing pretty well, and that was one of the lineups I was complaining to you about. I think I sent you a screenshot of Rager with 0 points, and then
you did.
Half an hour later he's fine.
You sent me I can't believe I played 2% Rager and 4% Thielen. They scored like 3 touchdowns within 9 seconds of each other.
Right.
It's a magical power you have, and you should keep using it.
Yeah, no, I'll give you the credit for the power. It's just me. Mine is just complaining. But anyway, what do you think? And this was like a thing last year. Like Murray just like destroyed the 49ers. Is a running quarterback against the 49ers still a problem?
Yeah, I think so. Dre Greenlaw, one of the better linebackers, is out now too. Like I think that hurts. I mean, I think that they don't blitz. Like I think they blitz like 7% of the time last week, and without that, if you don't get there, the running quarterback has time, and all of a sudden he can take off. And they seem to have trouble. Like Kyler was a problem. They had Josh Allen was a problem last year also when they played them. I think that's a play. And the problem with Devonta is Jason Verrett, their best cornerback, is now out for the season, and like. They don't have a second good cornerback. Like they have fine cornerbacks and they have guys that can play, but like Brett was the guy that you stuck on the best receiver. You don't fully shadow, but like he was out there a lot against the best receiver. They don't have anybody that can stick with a good receiver right now. I think the Devonta Smith, I think he's 4,500. I have to scroll down my sheet to see, but like, I think if you want to play him standalone also, I don't think how much is he?
54.
54. Okay.
Rager's 41.
Little switch of the numbers, but I think at 54, I think he's still really playable. He looked like their main guy last week. I think Rager played well too, but it seemed like Devonta was really, really involved. But I think that Hurts and Smith are very, very playable this week. And you talk about Hurts, how good he was last week, but I don't think he'll be popular either because there's so many options. And I think he's super playable against the Niners defense.
Yep. No, I think that definitely makes sense. So the two I wanted to ask you about, one we've kind of briefly talked about was New Orleans. And if everyone plays Kamara, should I just play Winston and Callaway again?
I think that
Callaway again, but not Winston.
I think you should think about playing Callaway off the bad game. I'm not playing Jameis this week, though.
Yeah, okay. I like Callaway. I think he's better off just being played solo, like as a one-off.
I do too. I think he's playable as a one-off. I think that everybody will. I mean, he was the chalk bust last week. He had one catch, but he was playing Jair Alexander, which we talk about corners, but more than anything, the Saints just didn't have to throw the ball. Like he didn't have to push the ball down the field. And we talked about 6 also wide receivers. They didn't have to. Like they just called everything away from that. They threw the ball to tight end. They ran the ball. It's just. I think that it's 1 week in the NFL and it's a game script thing. And I think that Callaway, you want to come back with it this week. I think it's very playable. Yeah.
Okay. So of these 4 teams, which passing stack do you think is the least popular?
Okay. I have a favorite sneaky stack, so I hope it's not unpopular. I hope it's right here. Let's see.
Okay. So it's the Dallas Chargers or Tennessee and Seattle.
I think the least popular of that group is Tannehill and AJ Brown or Julio. I think by a pretty decent margin too.
Shouldn't we just play them?
Yeah, I think that's very playable. Seattle is going to score. I think we saw Seattle. I mean, I think Russell Wilson only threw 23 passes last week and was really good. But I think Seattle looked really efficient. I think Tennessee looked terrible last week. They're going to have to score. Yeah, I think that if you want to be different, I think people will play AJ Brown because they could get some you get some Russ, Metcalf, Lockett, and then bring AJ Brown on the backside. But I don't think you get a lot of Tannehill and Brown or Julio. I mean, Julio didn't look great either. But if you want a piece of that game and a game that's the team that's getting behind, I think Tannehill is a very good tournament play.
Okay, because I'm looking at that one, and their implied total is not that high. In fact, it's the same as New Orleans. Their team total at least is behind the Patriots.
Seattle got thrashed by receivers last year too. I think that they played well last week, but Indy's offense might not be fantastic either. So
yeah, and so it's funny because I was looking at the Indianapolis passing game and I'm like, can I get away with this? I'm like, I want no part of this, none.
So let me give you my favorite sneaky stack before we jump on here. I really like the Cousins Justin Jefferson stack this week. Cousins 6,200, Justin Jefferson 7,400. Jefferson was only 5 for 71 last week, but had 9 targets, had a touchdown that somehow got robbed and not overturned on review. He clearly scored. I just don't think they had the right angle. It was weird. I'm like, oh, it's a touchdown. I flipped games. I came back. I'm like, why is Dalvin Cook have the ball? So
it's 2021, and apparently we didn't have the camera angle.
Yeah, right.
Despite 100 cameras in the stadium these days.
we've talked about like 7 different quarterback stacks. We didn't even get to Minnesota yet, but I think it works. They're going to have to score against Arizona. Arizona's going to score. I like the fact that Cousins is a little cheaper, allows you to come back with DeAndre Hopkins if you want to use that. I think that works really well. I mean, Cousins was 351 last week. He had 351, 2 touchdowns. Should have had 3 if he had the Jefferson one. They do need to give him time to throw. Like someone needs to block Chandler Jones. That's kind of probably going to be important this week, but I think it's a potential shootout. They're going to have to score. Arizona's going to score. I really like this as a stack that nobody's going to have. And it gives you a piece of Justin Jefferson, a top 5 receiver, and DeAndre Hopkins, a top 5 receiver. Then you get 2 great receivers. You get the lesser quarterback, and I think you can really roll with this stack.
Why don't I just play Adam Thielen?
Oh, you totally can play Adam Thielen. I didn't mean to leave him out. It's just like one of these weeks he's not going to score 2 touchdowns, and maybe this is the week. But at some point we have to stop saying that because he scores 2 touchdowns every week. They're just so similar in price that I'm going to go Jefferson for only $300 more.
Yeah, I think this like wide receiver group will be the same issue that we have with like Tampa and Dallas and Seattle. Like we have 2 guys, and which one do you play?
Yeah,
and I think like. What was the combination last week? Somebody in our Discord was asking about 2 guys that projected basically the same. They were teammates, but let's say it was Jefferson and Thielen.
Okay, I was gonna say Metcalf and Lockett, maybe. I don't know.
I don't think it was, but the example works just as well with Thielen and Jefferson. That if they project for basically the same number of points, then the only decision that you should make is based on who will be more popular. And if you're playing tournaments, you play the guy who will be less popular, because the number of, the realistic outcome is that they will be about the same.
Yeah.
And so like, if it's 50.5% of the time that Jefferson outscores Thielen, then there's 49.5% of the time that Thielen is the higher scoring one. And if fewer people have him, then you benefit from that situation. And I didn't even really respond to the question of like, who do you like better? Because like, it doesn't matter who I like better.
Yeah.
Like, and it was like, oh, do you think this guy will go off today? And it's like, that shouldn't even be a consideration. Like the DFS, at least those decisions in DFS, you cannot start thinking about like what I think will happen. Yep. Like realistically, what happens is they score the same number of points or very similar number of points. And so what I want to do is take advantage of the people who say, no, this guy is definitely better, because like there is no definitely. Like
I think you just fully made out the argument for Robert Woods this week.
Yes, right. It should have been Woods, right?
Yeah.
And we have that. There are so many teams that have this situation, but like we don't see Evans like significantly more popular than Godwin. Like those situations don't happen. But like we always see Metcalf more popular than Lockett.
Yep.
We always see Jefferson more popular than Thielen. And so it's like, if that's the case and their realistic outcome is about the same, always play the less popular guy.
Yeah, no, it's a good game theory GPP point, and I just probably one that I need to do a little more of. I get stuck in a little bit of I think this guy's going to go off this week, and that's dangerous. So
he might.
Yeah, you might. Before we move on, let's a note from our sponsors at Fantasy Stand. Playing fantasy sports is so much fun, but once you dive deeper, fighting against all the other players for a percentage of the pot, there might be sharks. Even when your fantasy team crushes it, those skilled pros may leave you without a single cent. Luckily, the days of having a great score and not getting loot are over. With Fantasy Stand, you're playing against the house. If you reach the threshold, you win. It's that simple. Sorry, baby sharks. To participate, choose a free or paid entry contest in the lobby. For salary cap, you have to pick 9 players while staying at or under the salary cap. For pick'em, you simply pick 1 player from each tier you're presented with, and you're all done. Now sit back and watch the results to see if your fantasy team has what it takes to stand out from the rest. Come out as the high scorer. Get ready for additional prizes. So where do you stand? Visit fantasystand.com to sign up today. So we talked about quarterbacks a bunch. Are there any expensive wide receivers or running backs you think are going to be really lesser rostered this week? Like we talked about, we didn't really talk about Dalvin Cook at all. He's 9,100. Derrick Henry's 8,300. Those are the 2 to me that kind of feel like they're going to slide in a little bit under the radar just based on game script and how they looked last week, which is really dangerous when you get guys like these. But both guys didn't do much last week. Seattle limited Jonathan Taylor to 3.3 yards per carry, so that's another thing against Derrick Henry. Dalvin Cook was only 20 for 61. Arizona, on the flip side, just played Derrick Henry really well, so they're kind of flipping teams here. I think those two will not be very popular this week. I mean, they're obviously Henry and Dalvin Cook, so people are going to click on them anyway, but I think they're the less popular of those guys at the top this week.
Yeah, no, I think the best way to look at running backs is to see which games have high totals and which games in high totals have receiving stacks that people want to play.
Yep. And
then go play the running back. Because if everybody's playing the receivers and they have to score all these points and do it. And like we were just saying, we like the idea of a Titans passing stack. So then, you can go play Henry.
Right. And how many times we're like, oh, this is not the week Derrick Henry goes off and he goes for 226 yards.
Right. 38 carries for 225.
and on your point with the passing stacks, does that make Austin Eckler kind of less popular than he should be this week, just based on the fact that people are going to play Allen or Herbert Allen and Jared Cook, like whatever he may be.
Yeah.
Does Austin Eckler get lost a little bit in that shuffle? No catches last week. I think a lot of people are focusing on that. Seems at 7,300 that I think in that range, people will be like, I'll just either I'll go to Chubb or I'll go down to Najee Harris. He seems like he gets a little lost to me in the 7,300.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think he joins, I can't believe I'm saying it again. Like, if you're thinking, do I want to play Wilson, Metcalf, Wilson, Lockett, Wilson, Metcalf, Lockett? Why not just take Chris Carson?
Yeah, I think Carson really, really jumps in the mix this week. He's cheap too. He's 60 on the scroll now. 6,100. He was really good last week. 16 carries for 91 yards. I know they were ahead, but 3 catches also. He can catch the ball too. But they're a home favorite with a high implied total. I think Carson's a really good. If you don't play a Seattle passing stack, I think Carson's someone that I'm going to slide in some lineup 6,100 on a bunch of spots. Him and Najee kind of in that same spot. I think both are really playable. You can even play both of them.
And we're talking about, Stafford, Woods, Cup.
No.
What about Henderson?
Darrell Henderson, who played a ton. I think everybody thought Sony Michel's going to get a third of the carries. Like Henderson, it was pretty much, he played 94% of the snaps.
Yeah.
I know that it was a weird game where the Bears were on the field the whole time and he just didn't get a chance to get tired. But I mean, he was 16 for 70, had a catch for 17 yards. He's 5,700. Another guy that I think is in that kind of middle range. I think there's a lot of guys you can play.
Yeah, I think fundamentally just do that. Even if you want to play a popular passing stack, there are plenty of running backs on those teams that you can play. I mentioned Ezekiel Elliott before. You're going to get Elliott.
No one's playing him this week, right?
Right. Why would anybody play him?
Why? I mean, the whole talk has been how he's been the worst first round pick of all that. And what is he, 6,200? He's cheap for Zeke. If you want to be different, it's like I said, week 2 is so much different than week 1, and we'll talk about it next week. I'm I can't believe this guy. We thought this guy was dead after week 1. I can't believe Ben threw 4 touchdown passes. We thought he was dead, but I mean, Zeke is he's active. He actually looked he looked in shape. He looked fast. He just didn't look great. He had a couple play he should have scored on, but yeah, if you want to be different, I think it's right there. And the same note, we talked about all these expensive receivers. We talked about guys that we're stacking with. Does that mean that no one's going to have Calvin Ridley this week at 7,500?
Yeah.
Everybody is so down on the Falcons and Matt Ryan. They looked horrible last week against Philly. They were at home. They scored 6 points. They looked terrible.
So bad.
But Ridley was 5 of 51, had 8 targets. Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb killed the Tampa secondary week 1. We talk about Tampa's D being really good, but those guys both had over 100 yards week 1. I can't imagine you get Calvin Ridley for a lower ownership or a lower rostership percentage this week than ever. There's so many guys. There's Metcalf, there's Diggs, there's Hopkins, there's Justin Jefferson, there's Lockett, there's Thielen, Allen. We talked about every single one of those guys in a stack, popular, high total games. Ridley's in the third highest total game. We haven't even mentioned him yet. Yeah,
no, I think if anything, he's at least popular only because of a run back.
That's true. Yeah.
But go the other way. Play. I can't actually tell people to play Matt Ryan. No,
don't say that there's a lot of things we can suggest, and that is not one of them.
Things get weird in the NFL, and so if you want to go Ryan, Ridley, and run back with Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown, whoever, I get it.
I don't think it's crazy. This game's 37-24, right?
Right.
And 24 is all you need to make Ridley pretty usable.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to see here. Their implied total 19.5, but
yeah. But I mean,
that's 2 touchdowns.
24 is not that far off. Don't think that. And fourth quarter garbage time, those stats still count too.
Yeah, no, I think that's that's absolutely one that nobody will think about playing.
Someone asked in the chat, James White, Javonte Williams, or Kareem Hunt in full PPR. I'll take Javonte Williams, even though we're not talking about season long. I'll do it anyway. But let's talk about tight ends.
PPR, so you're good.
Yeah, there you go. That's true. Let's talk about tight ends before we talk about some cheap running backs and receivers. We talked about Waller. We talked about Higbee. You mentioned Noah Fant. He's probably my favorite one down here. He had eight targets last week. If you want unpopular, George Kittle's gonna be like 2% this week at 6,400. Right? It's hard to play him at that price in this offense right now, but a really good player that no one is gonna have.
Yeah, no, I think it's like you took it right from my notes, because I'm like, I'm not going to pay that much for George Kittle. Like, why would I do that?
I don't think anyone is. And George Kittle is a fantastic player, but just the offense. He was 4 for 78 last week. It's not like Kittle was bad. Yeah. He had that one big catch where he had a bunch of yards after the catch. But I think the price point here just makes him really tough to play. And if you want to be different with a stud player, this is a good spot to do it, because he's going to be like 2%.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. The awesome thing about Kittle is he's a tight end with big playability.
That he's awesome.
But that too. But like, his big play is after the catch.
Yeah.
Like, he's not sprinting downfield and catching a 40-yard bomb. Like, he's actually just catching a quick one and just destroying people as he runs through them. I love George Kittle. Yeah, no, I think that's a great call. And yeah, I don't know why anybody would play George Kittle this week.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned Fant, we mentioned Higbee, but I think Gronk is going to be popular also down here. He's kind of in the fourth. He's 4,700. 8 for 90, 2 touchdowns last week on 8 targets, caught all his targets. Clearly is a guy that if we get inside the 20, Brady just locks in on him. Like, where's Gronk? And like, he actually checked to that. The second touchdown, he actually checked to that play. He saw the blitz on that side, just like, oh, that play's going to be open. And just say what you want about Brady. The dude is knows everything about offense. Like, it's fun. I don't like Tom Brady. Like, I get you can't like him unless you're a Patriots or Bucks fan, but like, the dude is unbelievable. He's 44, and I know. The one guy I want to ask you about before we move on to some cheap receivers and running backs. Kyle Pitts went up $800 in salary this week. He did nothing last week. Very popular last week. 4 catches, 31 yards. Had 8 targets. Target on 23% of his routes. Went up from 4,400 to 5,200. I have to imagine his rostership percentage is really way lower than it was last week. What do you think anyone does with him at 5,200?
I don't know why you play him, other than you're like, he's the second best receiving option on that team, and he's like kind of cheap. But like, I feel like a lot of the week 2 optimism on Kyle Pitts is foundationally from everybody's preseason expectations that he's a generational beast and will crush every week.
Yep.
And
I think you summed it up perfectly right there.
I just don't think this is the week we need to use him. And so obviously he is supposed to be very good and will have monster weeks. And I'm just not sure. I just don't see the need to pay $5,200 for him this week unless you're playing Matt Ryan.
That's fair. And I think it's just a point that he's $1,000 more than Fant. He's $1,100 more than Higbee. I just think it's hard to get there this week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Jared Cook's 3,900, and he had 8 targets last week in a game that is the highest total. I think that he works also. If you want to punt, if you want a full punt at tight end, James O'Shaughnessy is, I think, 2,900. 2,700. It's actually a real name. I didn't make it up. Had 8 targets last week for Jacksonville. It's a guy that Trevor Lawrence kind of was a security blanket. He kind of checked down to him. They're going to have to throw a lot. You got to think that, Denver played well last week. They're 6-point favorites. The Jacksonville looked terrible. They're underdogs. If you want a full punt, last week we had Tyler Kroft. He did okay. He had like 3 or 4 catches. Full punt this week. James O'Shaughnessy, I think, is playable with 8 targets last week. It's a full punt, Andrew. I'm not talking about 200 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
If you need the money, he's the guy that I'd go to down here.
The only one that kind of stuck out to me, and maybe because he's in this same range, and I'm trying to see where they are on my list here. What we didn't mention was, and I'm actually embarrassed to mention this, but we did not mention the Andy Dalton revenge game here. And I think if you can get access to Cole Kmet, at least, that'll get you some access to the Andy Dalton revenge game.
If I went with that, I'd probably suck it up and play Allen Robinson, who is nobody's going to have this week. Just That offense looks. He's 6,200, and he's a really good player for 6,200. But man, I mean, what do you have? He had 11 targets. He went 6 for 35. Like that's never, like it's so gross. And Dalton, I mean, I know that Dalton, they moved the ball. They got some first downs, but God, it's just so limited. Like I said, Justin Fields week 4. Maybe I was a week late on that one. I don't know, but let's talk about some cheaper running backs receiver. We got to get people in. We got to get all these guys stacks and stuff in. But first, a note from our sponsor, Vivid Seats. Preseason football is wrapped up, and we're ready for the regular season to kick off. Live events are making a comeback. There's no better place to be than Vivid Seats to get back into the action. So grab your NFL tickets and cheer on your favorite team from the stands. Man, that feels great to say. Even better, they just launched a new and improved rewards program with free tickets for every fan. Earn rewards, ticket upgrades, and perks just for shopping. You're looking for tickets to the big game, your favorite artist, or that new show everybody's talking about, Vivid Seats has it all. Visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, it's time to experience it live. So on the cheaper side, we talked about Carson. We talked about Najee Harris. Do you like Damian Harris at all this week? 5,400 at running back against the Jets. Looked really good last week until he lost the game by fumbling, and then they lost the game because of that. So Belichick does not really take well to fumblers, but it was only one fumble. He was 23 for 100 last week, 2 catches, 17 yards. Do you like him at all in a game that they are favored against your Jets?
Yeah, I get it. I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. I just think that there are too many good running back plays this week that the opportunity cost is just not worth it with Harris. Like, I just not sure I see like a multi-touchdown game. I think
we've kind of hit the running backs. That was the only guy I want to mention. I want to get into receivers a little bit before we get out of here, though. Steelers receivers. Juju and Deontay had a lot of targets, but they were all short. Is there anybody you'd play here? If I had to play one, and I probably won't, but I'd go Chase Claypool. He's 5,700. He's the cheapest. I think he's just the only possible big play guy. He was 3 for 45. He had a 25-yard rush last week. I thought he looked good. It just, I don't know. Their offense is weird right now. But if I had to play one, if you're like, I want to get one piece of the Steelers pass game, I think for me, it'd actually be Claypool this week.
Yeah, but he had a catch down the sideline. That was like an excellent play. I'm just not sure I'm overly excited about putting my money on Ben Roethlisberger helping anybody do anything. So
yeah, I think you're going Najee Harris in this offense this week and kind of moving on. But a Claypool, if you do want a receiver, Claypool is of the three the one I would play. There's other mid-range guys in here. We talked about Brandon Cooks was really good last week. It's a game that they should be throwing a lot. He's 5,900. Jarvis Landry 6,200. Odell Beckham has already been ruled out. God, I'm tired of Odell Beckham. It's just he was like ready to play week 1 and now he's not playing week 2. Like, I don't know what we're doing here, but Landry was 5 for 71 last week, had a rush touchdown. He's averaging 19 PPR points a game his last 6 games where Odell Beckham did not play. That's a pretty good number.
Yeah, I think, and we were talking before, I mean, Cleveland has one of the highest totals on the slate. And so, I mean, that makes a ton of sense.
They're clear number one receiver right now. Yeah. We've got they have Anthony Schwartz who can fly, and they have Donovan Peoples-Jones, but like Landry's clearly the guy that's going to get the most targets. Like you get the most targets on a team with that high of implied total. I think Jarvis Landry, this mid range, is playable. Talk to me about the Cincinnati wide receivers. We talked last week that we like T. Higgins. He looked pretty good till he got dehydrated, had to be carted off. It was weird. I thought he was injured. I looked up and saw the cart, and all of a sudden he was dehydrated. So that was a good avoided serious injury there. But he had 2 red zone targets. He had an end zone target. He's 5,400. Jamar Chase, who apparently can catch in NFL football, is 5,000. That joke has been made 9,000 times this week. But 5 for 101, 7 targets, had a nice bomb down the sideline for the touchdown. This is a game where they're at Chicago. I think we kind of see this as maybe a low-scoring game, but Burrow throws the ball a lot. Are you jumping in on the cheap Cincinnati receivers at all this week?
I'm not playing Mixon, so like theoretically that should like push you towards them, but.
Do you have one you prefer? Do you play the cheaper one? Would you play Higgins coming off the quieter game? Where would you go if you had to play one of them?
I don't think anybody's going to be that popular, so I'll just play Chase, who's the best one.
Okay, I think that's fair. And Jamar Chase, we talked about last week, like couldn't catch, but like is insanely talented. The guy was like a generational type receiver coming out of college. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he didn't play last year, but super talented. The only other guy in here. Two other guys. Corey Davis last week on your Jets scored 2 touchdowns. They seem like they kind of came late, but they should have to throw the ball a lot again. In that same game, Jacoby Myers is 5,100. He has 9 targets last week. He feels to me like maybe a cheap PPR guy, but like I just don't know if there's a lot of upside the way that he just runs a lot of short routes.
Yeah, New England's like a team that I'm just not sure whatever to do, and so I just try to like keep my frustrations out by just not playing them.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. So let's get into Uber cheap before we get out of here. One running back, if you wanted to swap and pivot from Eli Mitchell, do you see at all the case to play Chase Edmonds at 4,900? He's at Minnesota, 16 touches last week for 106 yards. Clearly, James Conner is the short yardage guy, but Chase Edmonds kind of was out there a lot. If you want to piece this offense and you want to get cheap with it, you can't afford Kyler, you can't afford DeAndre. He could bust a big play anytime. It felt like Chase Edmonds felt pretty good last week.
Is Kyler not the short yardage guy?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is that. There's obviously that too. But like, if they hand it off, it looks like third and short and goal line is James Conner. But Kyler's the guy. Kyler's the guy. Obviously, you want with the ball. But I think if you want to pivot off Mitchell, I think Edmonds is actually pretty playable in a game that we see a lot of points being scored.
I think that's absolutely right. I was going to mention him before how we were like, if everybody's on a passing game stack in a high total game, take the running back, and Edmonds just fits perfectly into that plan.
Yeah,
and he's cheap.
I think I prefer Edmonds to Mitchell this week.
I think from an actual production standpoint, it's not even close. I think it's absolutely Edmonds.
I think Mitchell will have 3 times the percentage though.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Yeah.
So I think if I'm going to go cheap running back in a build, I think I'm just going to play Edmonds and take the cheaper guy and take my chances there in a high scoring game. So my favorite. Let's talk about some cheap receivers. We talked about Marquez Callaway. I think that's a good last week's bum kind of thing at 4,200. Emmanuel Sanders is kind of interesting to me. We talked about Allen and Stephon Diggs. Emmanuel Sanders had 8 targets, and there's a lot of them were deep. He had a 20.9 ADOT or something like that. Diggs will have Xavier Howard, so maybe he gets the lesser coverage. I think if you wanted to get a cheap piece of the Buffalo passing game, I think Emmanuel Sanders 4,000 actually pretty playable this week.
Yeah, I always love Sanders. That ADOT was very strange though, because that's just not the type of player that he is.
Yeah.
But when you have somebody like Josh Allen throwing, then maybe that's the receiver you become.
Yeah, you mentioned KJ Hamler down here. He's 3,800. He was 341 last week. Jerry Jeudy's out. He dropped a 50-yard touchdown. Could have had a huge week. His price would have been a lot higher. His rostership would have been a lot higher if he caught that pass. But I think that he's a bigger part of this offense. I mean, he's going to be in the slot every time. They're playing Jacksonville, who gave up a lot of yards to Tyrod Taylor somehow, which I didn't know is still possible in this era. But I think Denver's pretty live. If you want to play guys, Javonte Williams at running back, Melvin Gordon. It's just too much of a split for me right now. And you're hoping that whoever hits the big play is going to work out. Gordon had the 70-yard touchdown last week, but I hate pure splits like that. Kind of Chubb's the only one from there that I'm okay with the splits because he's so damn good, and the setup is so good this week. But we had Marcus here in chat saying how many Denver players is too many to stack this week, and what's funny is that's a situation where we're like, yeah, I like Fant, I like Hamler, and yet we're like Bridgewater, and we're like, he looked pretty good last week, but I think I just play one of the receiving options is kind of the way that I get a piece of this. But
is Cortland Sutton just completely forgotten about then?
I think that's a really interesting one because he was 1 for 14 last week. I wrote him down here. He's 5,200. He played 80.5% of the snaps last week. He was out there a ton. Judy's gone. And he's expensive enough at 5,200. No one's going to play him, right?
Yeah. I feel like
if you're going to do it, you're going to go to Fant or Hamler.
Right.
And if you're in that range, you're going to play Chase or Higgins or Devonta Smith. He's going to be 1%, 2% owned at 5,200, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is, and I mean he's their best receiver.
Yeah, and I think he falls in. I don't think he's that far off Chase Higgins and Smith and maybe projections, but I think that if you want to be different, I like Sutton a lot. It's a really good point. I like him at 5,200.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked about Cedric Wilson, 3,100 played. He was in on 85% of the dropbacks after Michael Gallup left, so he's very, very involved. He only had 3 targets, but I think on the field in this game is kind of what you're looking for. We're looking for him at 3,100.
Yeah. I think that, when you're looking for these cheap guys, guys who run routes and in games that may have a high total, that's all you can really ask for.
We talked about Cleveland a bunch with Landry and with Chubb and with them a lot of implied total. Would you do anything with these cheaper guys down here? We have Donovan Peoples-Jones. Anthony Schwartz is 3,300. He had 5 targets. He was 3 for 69 last week. Dude is crazy fast and kind of playing that deep guy role. But I think if you play these guys, just hoping for that deep ball, and that's always tough.
Yeah, I like guys like that as one-offs more than I don't want to have to play Baker.
I don't think you play Baker in a game that they're going to run the ball a freaking
Right.
ton. So, anybody else down here? Those are the kind of the guys I like. I like Callaway, Sanders, and Cedric Wilson. I think the three down here and Hamler's playable, but I think I go Wilson, and I'd probably go up to Callaway or Sanders down here if I had to go a little more expensive.
No, I think that's absolutely the group. I guess the only one that that's sort of stuck. I'm trying to find his line from last week. So like if everybody's playing Cup and everybody who doesn't want to play Cup plays Woods.
You going Van Jefferson on me?
Did I spend $3,000 on Van Jefferson? Yeah. I mean, he had 3 targets last week, so like he's just like a pure.
Right? He just happened to have the big long touchdown play, but I don't know. It's tough. I just think they have so many weapons. But yeah, I mean, he could have hit a big play. I'd probably go. How much is Jefferson? He's 3,000.
Yeah,
3,500.
Was he 35?
Sorry. Yeah, 35. Yeah, I'd probably go one of the other guys we mentioned instead, just off the 3 targets.
I agree. I mean, Jefferson, what he did last week is what you need him to do for it to work out. And you're not going to get 5 catches for 50 yards. It's not happening.
You're right. You need that one big play. And with Stafford, It's always possible. But yeah, there's so many options there. I think I go with the other ones. Let's talk about defense really quick before we get out of here. Is there any defense that jumps out to you that you love this week? I think you're probably going to say the Patriots because Becton's out for the Jets. They gave 6 sacks as it was last week. Would you play the Patriots, D? What are you doing in defense here?
I like the Bears at home against Cincinnati.
That is wild because that's the one that I have bolded on here as the cheap one.
Yeah, I mean, 2,800 against a team that could throw 50 times.
And the Vikings lost, but they had 5 sacks this week. Burrow can't move. I mean, he looked fine throwing it, but I think it's pretty clear that Burrow, when he drops back, he's throwing. He's not getting out of the pocket right now. I think of anybody under 3,000, they are clearly the play to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, you can make a case. It's weird to see the Rams as the most expensive at 4,500 against Indianapolis. Like, I get it. Wentz can barely move in the pocket, but like, I don't know. It just seems like an absurd price when we have these teams under 3,000 that could match them easily. I usually love the Rams. I did not love them at the price this week. I have 3 in the mid 3,000s. I think I like a lot. I do like the Patriots. I like the Broncos a lot this week against Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence threw 3 picks last week and kind of looked lost for a bunch of that game. They're 3,800. I like that defense in that situation. I like the Browns. I mean, the Browns against Houston. The problem with the Browns, though, I like their defense a lot. I think they get sacks, but Tyrod is not really a risk taker, and you want risk takers. So I think that I'd move up to Denver if I was going to kind of play in that range, or the Patriots. I think Zach Wilson's going to be a risk taker. I think that he's trying to take a risk, but I think it's just kind of built in his DNA. He's got such a big arm that I think he sees stuff that he can get there. But more than anything, with Becton out and the Jets getting up 6 sacks last week, I just worry that their offensive line is going to get thrashed. Yeah, the Jets' offensive line was supposed to be like the biggest improvement this year, and they looked like worse than last year in week 1. And so, yeah, I won't actually say it on the podcast, but that's fine, Scott.
Fair enough. But yeah, I think if I'm going cheap, I'm going Bears. Like we said, Vikings had 5 sacks last week on Cincinnati. Burrow can't move, so I think that's there. Anything else that I feel like we hit a lot of players, different range. Is there anybody that we missed that you want to talk about? Anything on your mind you want to talk about? Anything like life decisions that you think you need to make really quickly that I can help you out with, that sort of thing?
No big life decisions today.
All right, fair enough. That's good for a Friday morning. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for listening to the podcast. As always, we really do appreciate it. We enjoy doing it, but we hopefully people enjoy listening to us. You can please rate or review the podcast. It goes a long way towards helping people find the podcast. There's a lot for us there too, so we really appreciate that. We want to thank WynnBET for their exclusive sponsorship all year. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET we thank them for that. Other than that, hope everybody has a fantastic week 2. We look forward to chatting every week, and hope everybody has a good one, and take care.